Homan, thank you so much for being with us today, talking about your work and your poetry. And we're sitting in North London, but it's possible to see some trees around. We're not too far from Hampstead Heath. How would you say that landscape and nature are important to you for your writing and for your poetry?
Sure. Well, the heath itself has always been there for me, having arrived in London about 6.5, that was the age, or 7 maybe. Yeah, so the landscape of the city has always contrasted or complemented the canopies of Hampstead Heath and the tree and the wildlife there and the 4 or 5 ponds that have just been always present for me and still am since I've moved back from Wales where I lived for 10 years. It's where I spend every morning. I go for a swim. And yeah, it informs a lot of my thinking.
Also in Wales, I imagine those wonderful mountains in Snowdonia have been inspiration for you as well.
Of course, yes. Yes, they grew over time, as has different natural features. I guess their unchangingness in the face of weather and human scale time. Without going too deep into it, I think they just naturally represent that to people. They just kind of accompany the background thought, and they're kind of a touchstone to life in the wider sense. It's good to have them in sight, I think.
And you put all of this into your writing and into your poetry. At the same time, you're working and helping other people, young people, Afghans who have come to this country, to love nature as well and to feel creative when they're in nature. Maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about what you do with them.
Yeah, so in Wales, after I finished my studies there, I just had the urge to introduce people who would otherwise not connect with the national park. So that could be ethnic minorities, there could be people who have suffered trauma, young people. So I would take reading groups out, we would play outside. I loved the idea of the communities that form around water or swimming that locals would engage with anyway, and just sort of discovering those little nooks, and then from there sort of validating it and seeing what can arise when they can express themselves in those environments, in those natural environments.
Coming from Afghanistan and leaving Afghanistan as a child, nevertheless, you must have had many influences all through your life from your family. And I'm wondering whether your family is very creative as well. Is that where you get your creativity from?
Of course, I do have a creative family. My father's a writer, and he was singing yesterday at home and being accompanied by a rhubarb, my brother who plays the rhubarb. And that's a very typical scene from our household. And to no particular standards, we weren't often taught grade music or anything like that. It's just a kind of natural habit. And that's something that I find very positive for what I want to help others in feeling confident in as well, and to play with experience and with the sense of self. I think there's something light about creativity, and it can go towards heavy topics, but it's inherently playful as well. And that's something that I'm passionate about, and something that informs a lot of my well-being work.
You talk about self-awareness and identity. As an Afghan, how do you bring your identity into your work?
It's interesting. Identity is a big topic for me. We grew up quite self-assured brothers I'm not sure how healthy that was, but quite confident. So it wasn't a thing of pain that initially cause the reflection of it, but I find coming into London and seeing this kind of mishmash of cultures, and then the internet age and the postmodernism where you pick and choose different bits. You've got a bit of, reggae and then punk and veganism and Hindu. This mishmash, more so than anything else, and perhaps as a refugee you stand slightly apart and you can see that. So on the one hand I really enjoyed engaging with that, and on the other hand you look for, well, what is there that's beneath and beyond these identity tidbits, for want of a better word. So it's through that you look into maybe nature, or I don't know, perhaps more spiritual awareness, consciousness, which is for me done through swimming, through walking, through silence when I can find it in London. But actually the cultural aspect of it, it's something I have a dual relationship with. There's a levity to that playfulness that I love. And I don't like using this word, but as I say, postmodernism, where you're a collage of different identities. You hold each one quite lightly, I'd say.
There's a lot of playfulness in your poetry that I sense when I read your poems. Is there a poem that you would like to read for us, maybe?
Sure, yeah. A lot of my work focuses on nature, but I've got a few about my memories of Afghanistan. So I'll maybe read one that I wrote the other week. This is a memory I have from Macron Corner. It's a kind of housing project in Afghanistan, a kind of communist housing project that we lived in. But it was quite a nice one, It's maybe a representative of like what the government wanted everyone to live by. But anyway, I would play out a lot, and we had a group of maybe 15 boys, all different ages, and sometimes we'd go hunting. Our gang, when aired out, for example, on a hunting excursion with a pinched air rifle of a sleeping dad, felt close as matchsticks marching in a box. Neighborhood tulips left carefully untrampled this time were centrales to a sparrow. A camouflage of dust followed the silence. Our hard-won marbles held still in pockets. And the bird shot so beautiful on the long slope of a branch, divvied and tongued by a startle of 10 boys over a small blue fire. So that
Beautiful poem.
Thank you.
So full of image and light and playfulness, as you were saying.
Yeah, it was a very playful memory, and then the shock of the actual reality of the bird. This tiny bird that we're dividing, I don't know, his liver or something into 10 pieces. It was kind of comical. It still feels quite comical, but it was one of those early memories of killing something.
And it's a memory from 6 years old, 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
You left Afghanistan when you were very young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was very young. So my memory of Kabul is my neighborhood, which is kind of mapped out quite clearly because I was always outside. And then the way to my primary school or my nursery, and then the neighborhoods of my cousins and my aunties. We were all very close, and we still are, as Afghans are. So I have a very particular map of Kabul that's perhaps not so extensive.
Let's look for a moment at what your hopes are now for the future. Where do you hope your work and your poetry will go, and your relationship with people coming into this country? How will that develop for you?
So my work focuses on water, and maybe there is a project that I will do where we take different groups, including Afghans, along bodies of water, and then they can reminisce about their own experiences of rivers and pools. Pools were remember in Kabul, an important kind of thing in my family. But actually, more broadly, want to do with my work, especially with refugees, is introduce a sense of ownership and playfulness and nuance with landscape that perhaps naturally comes when you're in a place long enough. So whether it's the way you interact with public buildings and private buildings and exploring them just on a very literal level, orientating yourself around London, and then having the confidence to, admire, challenge aspects of it, whether it's colonial aspects of whatever it might be. So to have the way I feel about, say, Hampstead Heath, where if they were to do something to the ponds, I would feel like, what are they, I have a sense of ownership of that. I think you can have that as a migrant. The sooner you feel that to a place, to a city, the more intricate and interesting your relationship will be and healthier. And then you're not looking at it from afar or as an outsider. Or maybe you want to continue looking at it from an outsider, but it's not the default position. So that's how I want to work in relation to landscape and nature and place with people. And then I would also just like to work with other well-being aspects, so body, sleep, looking after, and just thinking about mental health as something you can have some control over the variables anyway. You can't obviously control every aspect. And then lastly, just giving space to being rather than planning all the time. Planning usually equals worrying. So having seen that from my own experiences of family and migrants that I work with, they're either, thinking about the next generation or planning ahead. And the Afghans that I've been working in with the Arab scheme, there's a lot going on there, but on a day-to-day, a lot of that worry is continually in the mindset of what's next, what's planning, how can we settle, where can we, which is very important to do, but giving some breathing space, some silence to be, I think that's hopefully something I can maybe help with.
Thank you so much, Homan. It's been a really wonderful journey listening to you and going through so much with you about your work, but more about the inspiration that your work has created. And I wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you so much, Jessica.